friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, I'd like to thank Kaiser for sending in this week's prompt, which sounds like this. The world has died in an apocalypse scenario. You'll come up with that. Humanity has escaped on several high-speed weaponized cities on rails, battle trains. You will design one of these trains. Remember, humanity is in your hands. Do them well. And the outside world is deadly. Extra notes. There is no magic. There are only humans, so no dwarves or giant aphids, thankfully. And apart from the apocalypse scenario, you are confined to the train with hard physics in the world. Now, Kaiser, thank you so much for submitting this world building prompt because it is a really inherently cool scenario. There is one caveat that I kind of want to get off. I'm not sure how hard physics we're going to be with this because none of us are really physicists and none of us are really too keen on the science bit. So we're going to try and hold ourselves to some level of hard-ish science. But if we go off the rails, then that's just how it's going to have to be. And before we get into today's episode with our tenets, I would just like to remind you that if you want to submit a world building prompt to us, you can always do so by sending in an email at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, and we can build your world with you. So where are we going to start today? Courtney, what is one of the first tenets of Battle Train World that you want to get started here?
All right. So speaking of just getting off the rails right away, based on the prompts, inclusion of like constant movement, high speed rail like trains, and also the weaponization factor, I was thinking that that's necessary for survival because something is seeking out these trains or is drawn to them in some way in the environment. So I mean, I know you said giant aphids are not going to be included, but what about like giant mosquitoes that are seeking them out, like seeking out the carbon dioxide, or I don't know, vampires, something akin to that.
Okay, so I do want to stick to the no magic thing, and I think that vampires are pretty inherently magical.
I guess.
The undead and the afterlife, I think, are supernatural.
Yeah,
I suppose,
exactly.
Yeah.
So there's no zombie train scenario that we can kind of get into here.
I am interested in the giant creatures. I would caution against giant insects because I believe, from a physics standpoint, that's a problem.
Oh yeah, they would just like immediately
they would collapse in on
in
themselves.
Particular.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They would implode. Yeah.
Well, maybe it could have something to do with my tenet as well, because mine is actually kind of similar to yours. I was similar to Courtney. I was thinking that there's got to be something that necessitates people keep moving. You know, what keeps people moving? Why do they have to keep moving? And my tenet was there are massive rainless lightning storms. Think of like the giant hellstorms from Mad Max Fury Road that are the reason that people have to keep moving because they are constant and hellacious always. And the lightning itself is actually going to be the power source for the rails themselves. So the rails are also act as like conductors that also charge the trains as they keep moving. That's one of the ideas that I had. And maybe we can kind of tie the two together, Courtney, and figure out something that works along those lines.
Yeah, I really like that idea. That was actually going to be my other tenet of having to do with the power source, but that's fine. That's cool.
Wait, what do you mean? What part about it?
Oh, just that like the source of power, because they're constantly on the move, has to be from something sustainable. One of my ideas was like magnetized rails of some sort, but I feel like your lightning strikes on the rails are a really cool idea.
Yeah, because I don't think like Gravlev trains are necessarily going to be like, I don't think that they're going to survive an apocalypse scenario, you know, but I think like having magnetized or lightning enabled rails is probably a good way to do it, to kind of get rid of it.
Yeah, that is very cool. I like that a lot.
Plus it's sustainable. So it's a matter of like, okay, sometimes trains have to slow down and repair rails, but that's like really just about it. There's some justification for, we can hop out, repair this piece of the track real quick, and keep it moving.
Yeah.
I wonder too if you guys were talking about what ways to merge the two concepts, if perhaps those storms are somehow alive, since Courtney was looking for a beast-like antagonist.
Like a hunter of some sort, yeah.
So there's an intelligence to the storms in some way, correct?
Yeah, because like she was suggesting giant mosquitoes pursuing them. I really like the idea of like hellstorms that are lightning and they also power the rails. But what if like there's some sentience in the storms?
Mm-hmm.
See, again, I am trying to respect the prompt that we were given, and I want to try and not think about magic, because again, that sounds.
Well, that doesn't have to be magic. It
could be,
it could be scientific. It could be a living creature that was created perhaps as a result of whatever post-apocalypse happened.
Yeah.
Okay. With hard physics in mind, how are we getting kaiju that bring like giant electric storms into this? Because that's something that we'd have to reconcile here. I'm not against
distributed intelligence. Distributed intelligence. There's something that's been unleashed into the atmosphere,
like a hive mind kind of thing.
Or I mean, it could be, but what I mean is like it's like, how you have like some creatures that are merely just nervous systems. Like maybe there's like a nervous system in the sky that's developed and it's semi-sentient.
Why am I thinking of jellyfish?
I was just thinking
yes,
that too.
That's what I'm thinking.
So we got jellyfish in the sky.
Okay. All right. All right. We will make this one exception. We have to stick to the rest of the prompt, but we can make storm jellyfish a thing. And that is the reason that the electrical storms exist. And also that is what's chasing humanity down. I'm okay with that.
It's beautiful.
We cannot, we are literally two prompts, or we're 2 tenets in, and we're already bending to the point where it looks like, okay, we're very close to going off the rails. So
it's not our job to figure out how the hard science works for that. I mean, it's possible.
Daniel, what's your next tenet? So we can go ahead and please, Daniel, please don't snap the already bent premise that we've got going on here. But what's your tenet, Daniel? What do we got?
One tenet I had was that there was remnants of whatever weapons were used in the apocalypse or the apocalypse war that happened or disaster. So the trains have been outfitted with the remnants of those weapons, and they serve as like deterrents in the sense of like mutually assured destruction on each train.
Are you saying that there's nukes on these trains, Daniel?
Preferably not nukes, because that's boring.
Okay.
What about biological weapons?
Oh,
those are always fun.
Those are always terrifying, though.
I
also, are you talking about the giant jellyfish that we just made? Because maybe that's biological
derived from it. Yeah, maybe it's derived from that.
Oh yeah.
Interesting. In what sense, Daniel?
Like if whatever happened created this entity in the sky that's the scientific offshoot of whatever war they had. Perhaps like there's aspects of it that have been salvaged from the war, from the remnants of the war, and outfitted into the trains. So like, for example, maybe one train has like some kind of EMP pulse or something that's derived from the technology that accidentally created the sky jellyfish.
Maybe this is a good time to go into the apocalypse scenario, because Kaiser asked us to come up with like how humanity has essentially died out, or why we're in an apocalypse scenario as it is. So maybe we can figure that out, and with that in mind, we can then create some kind of weapon that go along with the apocalypse that we've created.
Yeah.
I agree with Daniel. I don't think we should do nukes or anything like that, because that is kind of standard and kind of boring. So what is the apocalypse scenario that we're dealing with? We could do something like climate change, where we just ignore it to the point where it like absolutely demolishes us. We could do something else. What are we thinking about here?
I mean, it sounds like if it has to do with the atmosphere, we might have been trying to fix the environment and fucked it up worse.
Hey, that sounds more like something we could do. Okay.
Right.
Like
Um,
the what is it? The geoengineering type stuff that's been tossed around lately.
like
Idea
terraforming.
or ideas of doing like manipulating the atmosphere in such a way that, for
Hmm.
example, not as much sunlight can penetrate and warm the world.
Oh, that would explain a dark, lightning-filled
Mm,
atmosphere.
yeah.
All right. I like where we're going with this. Can we have it so that the world has been desiccated?
Yeah,
So
Oh
so
yeah.
there's no water anymore.
Ooh.
yeah,
Yeah.
or like minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I was trying to figure out what people were going to be fighting over, because they're battle trains, they've got to be fighting over resources, but they have perpetual movement, so that's not an issue. And I think food is a little bit too basic unless we're going full cannibals. So I think having water as a resource to fight over is actually something that's interesting and would explain and fits into the world, and we can tie it into the apocalypse scenario as well.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of Mad Maxy, so that could work.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, exactly. You don't want to become too over reliant on water. I mean, you don't want to get addicted to it. That's just how it is.
Yeah. You
Absolutely.
don't want that. It's the worst.
I believe and trust in Immortan Joe when he says those things to me.
I forgot that he said that. That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Also, what is it? The when the oceans are just a giant salt flat, like that's a really cool thing that we can kind of
Yeah,
fuck around with too.
I like
Yeah.
that too.
Um, okay, all right. So we've got the apocalypse scenario as we tried to, and this is going to be future tech, so it is going to be physics are involved, but again, we've got to bend a little bit because we're not too familiar with the science. But we're going to say that in some regard, we tried to fix the atmosphere, and as a result, just uh, catastrophic failure, and we've now desiccated the majority of the world where water is the rarest resource that we can get.
Yeah, it's got a
Hmm.
kind of semi-Martian landscape. That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
I,
There's
I was actually
extremes.
when I was looking up like lightning storms and stuff like that, there are planets that have like massive
Hmm.
lightning dust storms, and I
Hmm.
was like, oh, that's like Mad Max. That can totally work.
Yeah, that's what I
This
was
is
saying. Like when
yeah.
you have planets whose like Venus is probably the best example, but like when you have planets where the extremes go swings from one to the other, you have all kinds of crazy weather effects.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is also
Yeah.
making me think of the black blizzards that occurred during the Dust Bowl period in the United
Oh yeah.
States when basically the landscape had been like overworked for farmland and pasture land, and because of that, the wind was able to sweep up just all of this dust and basically create literally like black blizzards where the sky would just become black with all the dirt in it.
I think you recommended me that book,
The
the
worst hard times. Yeah, that was
yeah.
an excellent book. Yeah.
That is, yeah, I strongly recommend The Worst Hard Times. It's a great book. Also horrifying because there
Yes.
are accounts of like babies essentially being suffocated to death because of the dust storms. Like that's how heavy the dust and soot, or not soot, but the dust was in those storms, like enough to fill your lungs. And that is just unbelievably horrifying. So we should have something that's like that here as well. That's a good point. That's a good reference, Courtney.
Mm.
All right, so we've got the apocalypse scenario. So what are we going to do with the weapons? Like, are they atmospheric manipulating weapons? I don't think that necessarily works for me, but maybe we could figure out something along those lines. Like, do they have like desiccator rays? I don't think that's a thing that
I
can
mean, they could
happen.
all be derived from whatever concepts would be useful in trying to change the atmosphere or trying to change our environmental conditions. So, like one example could be dealing with extreme heat or cold. So perhaps it was there's a tool, there was a device that's part of the system that was meant to like have us survive in environments that have been irreparably like damaged in one direction, and now they're using those devices for the opposite effect. So like maybe it's meant to stop extreme cold, but the way that it does that is by generating heat, and so now that's a weapon they can use on a train.
Now we've okay. I'm so fucking down for this because now we just got fucking flamethrower doof
Yep.
warrior motherfucking
Oh
on
my
the
God.
train.
Yeah.
I'm so
Exactly.
with this. Yeah.
And they probably don't really know how to
Absolutely.
use it because these people, like, they're not climate scientists. This is the dregs of society who survived.
Yeah,
So,
they're
Yeah.
cobbling together whatever they can
right.
and using it for whatever purpose, however twisted they can get their hands
Yeah,
on. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, and they probably like have killed a lot of their own people trying to turn these things on or use them properly. Like I could
Yeah.
imagine a lot of radioactive, equipment that was like perhaps the equipment was part of a larger device and they pulled out a radioactive core, or like it's something that was supposed to be hooked up to a system that regulates the power and it's just out of control.
I think that's where you're going to start getting like weird twisted landscapes as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. So okay, so we've got some weird like repurposed tech that is perhaps being used wrong. I like that.
Mm.
Um can we also talk about one other thing that I'm actually really curious about? I want to see if anyone else brought this up as a tenet. But how do the battles work exactly? Because they're on rails. So
Mhm.
it's obviously going to have to be like the front and the back are going to have to be the most well defended parts of the train, right? So I imagine that no matter what train you're on, the center of the train is probably going to be the rich part because it's going to be inherently it's going to be the safest part, right?
Mhm.
Also, like other questions around the whole situation. In his description, didn't he say the trains are like they carry people cities?
Cities on rails. Yeah.
I imagine that just meant that's where the majority of the population is. I basically approach this as Snowpiercer, but not
Uh-huh.
like our version of Snowpiercer, but different. You know what I mean?
So the reason why I asked that question is because are we talking about literal trains or are we talking about some kind of train that we devised, I don't know, 60 years from now that's meant to be mass produced around the world to replace like the whole driving ecosystem we have in
Uh,
order to save the environment. So these aren't necessarily long windy trains with multiple cars attached to them. Are they something else?
so that was actually one of the other ideas that I had, that maybe trains in this setting can take on sort of abnormal shapes. Like when you think of seafaring ships, you've got like small fishing vessels all the way up to
Yeah.
cruise liners and
Mm-hmm.
gunboats and aircraft carriers. Like, what if there's that level of variety in whatever these trains
Like I
are?
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that type of idea as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because like, why did so if these trains are everywhere and they're a primary means of traveling prior to the apocalypse, we must have had a reason for building them. And I'm guessing it was to, I don't know, reduce our carbon, what do you call it? Reduce our carbon footprint, or
Hmm.
perhaps like get rid of an insane traffic situation we have and like change the way cities work, right?
Mm.
See, I don't necessarily see them as a relic of the old. I see them as like an interstitial technology that's necessary. Like I see it as like these trains were built as, oh shit, humanity is dying. We have massive dust electric storms. How can we fix this? I don't see it as, oh, this is what we were using beforehand. Although maybe we can kind of combine the two ideas and have it so massive rail projects were already underway, as Daniel said, to try and reduce emissions and whatnot. But then they transformed into these city and people movers as a result of
Hmm.
the absolute collapse of the or the atmosphere.
I mean, you
Yeah.
could have a basically the middle ground could be that, like you're saying, those projects were starting and it was a solution, but during the apocalypse, that's when they really put them into production and changed their purposes, right? Because everything was collapsing, the environment was being destroyed, and so they're like, okay, well, we can turn this train into like some kind of like sea submarine thing, or we could turn this train into a mountain crawling um, thing as well, so they made massive adjustments to the plans and then also cobbled weapons onto them based on what they had left from the disaster, so like just your point, it's an evolution as they were developing them and deploying them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that what probably ended up happening is that the first thing that they wanted to figure out was how food is kind of taken care of, right? And I think
Hmm.
food is probably one of the biggest things. And that's actually something that we can talk about with water, because how do you have food without water? right? And I think that's probably what, and each train in each city essentially is, we need water to survive, because without water we have no food. Also, we need water to live in general, but I think water is going to be the big thing when it comes to like feeding people. Without water, people are starving, because I imagine that these trains are relying on like hydroponics to a certain extent, right?
Maybe there's two things. Maybe the trains like receive power, right, from the storms, but the trains themselves, each of them has like a hydropower station in it where they keep their precious resource and are able to dole it out to everyone on the train. But
Mhm.
it's the most dangerous part of, it's the most vulnerable part of the train, because that's where their water resources. But they recycle it throughout the train to keep it moving. Like, that's the locomotion.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of, I imagine that there's probably a waste recycling aspect to this as well,
Yeah,
because
like
I
it's
was also
that's
just
self-sustaining.
water
thinking
that
that,
you
yeah.
can't, you
Yeah.
can't waste water like that. That's just not something
Yeah,
you
so
can
I'm
do.
saying like it powers the train, it also powers the hydroponics on the
Okay.
train, and it receives energy from the storms.
Okay. So let's go ahead and do one of the things that Kaiser asked us to do, and let's go ahead and design one of our own trains then.
Neat.
So if the way that you're saying this, Daniel, is that I would like to have a massive train, like several, I would say probably 2 stories tall, or let's go 3. I'm going to say 3 stories tall, this train.
I'm cool with
Okay.
that.
All right.
Are we making one train? Is that the idea?
Well,
Yeah.
yes. The part of the prompt was we will specifically design one of these trains.
Okay.
So I'd like to design one of the bigger ones, like rather than one of the small scrappy ones. Nah, fuck that. I want something that's going to have height and girth to it. So I'd love to design something that is 3 stories tall. And also I like the idea that you have, Daniel, where there is like some kind of essentially it's like an aquifer that's built into the train that's using and recycling water in some way. I think that's actually a really interesting aspect to the idea as well.
Yeah, it's basically a way for them to keep their precious resource with them, I think.
As much as possible. And like I said previously, I think because if we're coming at this from rails, no one's coming at you from the sides, right?
Right.
Unless there are train crossings, which I guess would be like the most dangerous parts of the
Wow.
world.
Actually, that's kind of interesting and cool. Yeah, because in my mind, right, I had this idea that the trains are coming, like the front and the back are going to be the most well organized or well defended parts, because how else are you going to board the train? Actually, you know what? Unless you could do something.
Yeah, why is that? I just don't understand. Like, if I'm a raider, right? Like, wouldn't I want to go to the center of the train? Because
Well, think about it this way, Daniel. The most powerful entities on the planet are these trains, correct? So the trains are confined to tracks. So if you're a train and you're trying to raid another train, you can literally only come at it from the front or the back. Because
right, I could see that if you're
right.
attacking with a train, but I could imagine if you're like coming, I got them like, I don't know, on a little buggy or something, you definitely would not want to approach the front.
No, but I would imagine that because trains, are a big threat, that the front and the back are going to be the most well defended, and then the center is also going to be really well defended, but in a very different way. I imagine that the caboose and the front part of the train that I don't know the name of are essentially going to be just like bunkers in and of them. Like they are strictly like military, like they are walls that the military, whatever they might be, stand upon and guard, whereas the center bits are probably a little bit more commercial. And then once you get to the center, that's also probably built a bit more militarized, because that's where your aquifer is going to be.
Sorry, go ahead, Freddie.
I was just gonna say the front and back could also be like electrified as sort of like a defense mechanism too, to keep people from.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think the entire train could essentially be electrified.
Yeah,
Really,
pretty much.
yeah.
I had a question about the rails. So, because again, like I don't know anything about trains, but I do know some sci-fi stuff. And so I'm wondering, like, are these rails that are now crisscrossing the world because as a part of whatever this environmental project was, they started putting them in place. I'm imagining that the charter to create all these rails is probably similar to like continental like wires that were put in cables that were put in place to have internet go from continent to continent. So with these rails, like, are they literally regular rails, or are they like, I don't know, like superconducting tunnels, or are they? I feel like they're not your typical rails, especially if they're
No.
receiving power from storms now.
Correct. Yeah, they're augmented rails in some way that we don't really have to focus on too much because that's not really our purpose right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean,
Like,
in designing the train, though, if the rails aren't always, say, on the ground, like, do they? If let's say they're like tunnel shaped, as an example, like that means they could cut through a mountain, or they could go up or down, which would change the way we design the train.
right, but when I'm thinking about these trains, right? What's to stop humanity from just sitting inside of a tunnel or sitting inside of a mountain and becoming dwarves, you know?
Because they need
So,
to be in the storms, right, to get the electrical charges.
right, but
Yeah.
you could also be my main issue is who's going to have the time to carve out a tunnel? Who's going to have the time because part of it is there is an inherent danger to the world now, and you're going to have to be like, okay, it's going to take us a long time to dig into a mountain, essentially, right? Or because these train, what am I trying to say?
I'm picturing that I could see some pretty cool like tunnel battles like through mountains with cranes passing each other, and maybe in the
Right.
confined space. That'd be kind of neat.
I don't see why we can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I'm
And
just
I
I'm
could
just
also
wondering, like, oh, good.
oh, I could also see like underground tunnels or mountain tunnels being a place where like the non-train people might live, like if they're
Oh
kind of
yeah,
stragglers or like maybe they're even seen as like savage groups by the train
train
dwellers.
stations.
Hmm. Oh
Um
yeah, and so like underground and in mountains are the only place that you could really stop and like
Yeah.
refuel for a bit and like have
yeah,
some level of trade in some way.
right.
And then you can switch tracks, like, because as different cities come
Sure,
through,
Mhm.
you
they're
could pop
they're
in.
neutral ground. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm just thinking because going back to what you're saying, like we're gonna design this really huge train. So, like, for example, if these tracks go into like unusual environments or take unusual paths through the environments, you could have this 3-story train that sidles up a mountain, or it, like, I don't know, it goes underwater through a tunnel of tracks to go underwater. There'd be all kinds of weird
Mhm,
environments you
mhm.
could do.
Sure. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that, but I'm just thinking of like the maintenance of an underground or an underwater tunnel. Like
Right?
is
Yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
extreme and more extreme because I think part of the conceit of the world is it's safest on these trains, right?
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And I think that there's got to be some inherent danger to living in a static place. And I think what Courtney said, bringing up the Dust Bowl stuff, is probably where I'm going to go with it. So
Mhm.
even underground, there is a potential for you to get buried in dust, or a massive
Yeah,
dust
like,
storm to come through.
you
Oh
don't want
yeah,
to not you want to be in a train, because if you're not on a train, one, you don't have water because the trains are where they keep the water, and two,
Mhm.
like, you're subject to all the elements. Even underground, there's terrible things happening.
Right,
yeah. Like those
right.
tunnels could essentially act as wind tunnels during one of those
Uh-huh.
Oh
dust
yeah, that's
storms, and
actually a
it's like
really
a
good
just
point.
a vortex of dust in there.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of brutal, actually. Damn. Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue to design our train, huh? Because I want like a 3-story train. That's my one
Mhm.
aspect of the train that I want to add in. Someone add in something else.
Oh, I want the train. This our train aficionados gonna hate this. I want the train to be able to I don't want to say the word transform because people are going to think Transformers, but I want it to be able to change its terrain mode, basically.
Can you expound upon that a little bit?
So, like, say, for example, they need to get through an area that's like heavily raidable, or like it's a very, very dangerous area. So maybe like it can flatten its exterior so that it becomes more aerodynamic and faster, for example.
Oh, so there's like a cruising mode and then there's
Mm.
like a transport mode.
Yeah, or like there's an armor mode where it puts out an extra level of plating, when it
Hmm.
knows it's being bombarded. So I want some kind of like modes on it.
Yeah, I'm down with
Yeah,
that.
I
That
like
sounds
that.
dope as fuck.
That is very cool.
I mean, I imagine there's like a siege mode where it's like, all right, we're getting raided. Time to put on the plates and time for the
Yes.
turrets to like the turrets like
Yes.
swing out basically.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah,
when
yeah,
they're
yeah.
in like stealth mode, it like puts up these camouflaging plates so it seems the same color as the desert they're traveling through. And it tries to make itself quieter.
Sure, we can do something like that. And Courtney, what you get to add in here too? So we've got a 3-story transformer train. What's your addition to this?
Sure. So I keep picturing some sort of like greenhouse biodome in the center, like we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
for the food and water source. Um, that I mean, obviously there isn't too much sunlight anymore, but I imagine that when there are like glimmers of sunlight, they want to take advantage of that um, and harness that energy for growing food and all of that as well.
See, I have the exact opposite thing in
Mhm.
mind where there is actually too much sunlight. Like where
Oh,
it's
I gotcha.
basically well, actually, where there aren't storms, there is like intense sunlight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we could
Interesting.
have like a weird terrarium in the middle.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a really cool idea is to have a giant greenhouse in the middle. It's like this big, beautiful glass gem, you
Hmm.
know?
I mean, there could be hot zones like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's almost like a central park of sorts, like in the middle of the train.
That's exactly what I had in mind.
Yeah.
It's like, do you want to see the tree? Guess what? I got a place for you to go. All right, so we've got these 3 elements. Now let's name something that is unique to our train. No other train on the planet has this but ours. What's it going to be? Let's make it really interesting.
I think it should be cultural, like some kind of sacred thing that no other train has because has cultural value.
In what sense? Like, are we talking a religious aspect here?
Sure. I mean, what's religion like in this world?
Um, oh man. I was thinking of just like some kind of weird neo Christianity or
Uh-huh.
neo Islam or
I
something
mean,
like
that's what I
that.
loved about Mad Max is there were overtones of not a religion but a
Religiosity.
faith. Yeah, like some sort
Yeah.
of belief. Like when they
Hmm.
talked about they said in the past people used to watch shows. Like it's kind of like having this weird like out of time feeling. So like having some weird religious artifact that points back to an earlier time might be interesting.
Courtney, what are you thinking?
Um, I'm wondering if it could tie into the greenhouse in some way. Like,
Ooh.
is this the only train that has a successfully like functioning and still intact terrarium greenhouse area? Like, were all the others
Yeah.
destroyed?
Let's also go ahead and tie it into a cultural slash perhaps religious aspect as well.
Right, like
Um,
could have to do with like almost worshipping the plants themselves or
mhm.
um yeah, something related to that. Or maybe there are animals in there that are only in there because they've been able
They're
to
the
keep
only
that
ones left.
environment. Yeah.
That's actually what I was thinking. That's actually very close to what I was thinking.
Mm.
It's the only train that has a zoo.
Oh
Mm.
yeah, that's
Mm.
neat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because not only that, it's a show of opulence as well,
Right, yeah.
where we have the resources to maintain these animals that don't actually do anything for us.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely a luxury to have that, and I imagine that
Yeah.
other train societies see that as like a just an excess, like, do they
Hmm.
really need all of that? Like, can't they, like, give us some of those animals to eat? That sort of thing?
Yeah.
I bet that our train has a reputation of like decadence as a result.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, where when animals represent extreme wealth, this is like they have animals just to look at.
That's
What?
very androids. Do androids dream of electric sheep? Having animals being a sign of
Yeah.
of status, you know.
I mean, even speaking of sheep, like imagine if like wool clothing was like
Oh,
super expensive because this only this one train actually has living sheep that they can harvest wool from.
okay. I like that a lot. Actually, I really do like that a lot. I think that we can probably go with that. So we have the zoo train, and that is the one unique thing about our world. That's really interesting. Okay, that's cool. And Daniel, that ties into your cultural aspect as well, because zoos are inherently cultural. Like they
Yeah,
say a lot.
exactly. Yeah.
All right, cool. Oh, all right, we are like this is becoming so interesting and fleshed out. I'm loving this. So it sounds like we've really done a great job in fleshing out the parts of the world that need to be fleshed out. Do we have any tenets left that we need to discuss?
I don't think so.
Nah.
All right, so if there's no more tenets, then I think it's time that we roll on to the anchor world building jam portion of our show, where we're going to figure out a subject, whether it be an item, a monster, a place, an historical figure, an event, or a cataclysm that fits in with our world, and then we have to make it an anchor in the world. It's going to be of great significance. So we're going to be rolling the subject, which is going to be an historical figure. And we have a theme surrounding that historical figure. It's going to be between tragedy, sacrifice, love, metamorphosis, pride and honor, madness and the unspeakable, triumph and hope, and treachery and revenge. And before I roll this die and figure out the theme that we're going to be going with this historical figure, I would just like to throw out, I would love for this historical figure to be the leader of our train, regardless of what the theme comes out. Or what do we think about that?
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, cool. We can add on to him, but I want them to be the leader of this train in particular. So let's see what the theme is going to be. Okay. Okay. So kind of biting myself a little bit. We're going with madness and the unspeakable.
Yes, I was hoping for
Nice.
that. I was like, pride and honor is an easy one. We can do that one. And then I'm like, no, we got madness and the unspeakable. So this is the anchor. This is the leader of our train. This is the conductor. Well, actually, it's not the conductor. It's even higher than that, but that's not important. So how do we want to make this happen? How do we want to reconcile the theme of madness and the unspeakable with our train leader?
So I have a couple of thoughts right away. One has to do with how the train is like basically really high class luxury, but like at what cost? Is there subjugation of a lower class, or has this train taken advantage of a lot of other societies in the past? The other one was, what if this guy took the zoo aspect way too far? And I guess this is also kind of going back to our space whales episode, but essentially saw the animals as like, I don't know, divine creatures in some way, that, or he receives guidance from them in some way. Like he's kind of lost it a little bit.
I like part of that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go with that. I actually do want to keep away from the dog made me do it type thing, because I think that's a little bit overplayed. But I do like the other questions that you're asking here. Daniel, what do you think?
I would say that if you pervert the cultural affinity they have for the zoo, that would lead someplace interesting. And that, let's say, it's not just about preserving these rare animals and the remnants of what came from the past, but there's also like a perverse sense of purity about it. Like they not only don't want to share their animals with other people, but they also don't want them to breed them and to like corrupt this pure fragment of the past that they're holding on to.
Ooh,
So
yeah.
it's almost like I'm thinking like Monsanto or like, you know, seed production that's patented and restricted. Like they're doing that with animals too, and with the plants they have, and through controlling that, they're maintaining some level of power over the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is going to sound a little bit strange here, but I'm now thinking of this as a reverse Noah's Ark,
Yeah.
where instead of, taking all of the animals to preserve them so they multiply, these
Mhm.
are the last animals that will ever
Yes.
exist.
And
And
they're
that
not
is
letting the world have it. Yeah.
Yeah.
and so like rather than let those animals, like populate and maybe get somewhere, it's like, no, we're shepherding them into oblivion.
And they're
Right.
actively stealing them from other trains in other parts of the world.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, the other aspect I was thinking of as well is when Courtney was talking about the reverence towards these animals and, an underclass, maybe there is some kind of religiosity to it where the animals matter more than the people do.
Yes,
So-
they do.
Yeah.
So because it's their whole thing. So why not make it so it's people will suffer so the animals don't,
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So people get fed to in fact, in order to keep the animals fed, because
Ooh.
because in order to keep the animals fed, like you have to have
Yeah.
a lot of you gotta have a lot of food to do that, and that requires a lot of energy. And what better way to do that but to breed humans who are meant to be feed for the animals?
Okay. This is becoming incredibly dark very fast.
That just really took a turn. Yeah.
Yeah. Question
Unspeakable.
though.
You wanted the unspeakable.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get that. But are they breeding them or are they raiding others for that?
Ooh.
I would say sure, but no, I think they're breeding them because it is more expensive to take the risk of attacking another train just to get food for them to feed the animals, when they could breed an underclass of people who believe in the faith and are willing to sacrifice themselves to the feed to keep the animals who are sacred alive.
Okay,
Mhm.
but also why can't we do both, right?
Oh, of course. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe
like-
sometime maybe there's
Okay.
an uprising and they got to get some slaves from another train to feed them. Like in this case.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is so twisted and dark, and I
It is.
fucking really appreciate that. Oh man. Okay. That is fucking ridiculous. And I think that we're gonna stop there for now and roll into a twist, because holy shit, that is absolutely insane. Okay. We're gonna roll the twist that we're gonna have to reconcile as of next episode. If you want to submit your own twist to the twist list, you can always do so by sending an email to worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or by coming to our Discord, or by becoming our patron. That one of those things will work, I'm sure. But anyway, let's roll the twist that we're going to have to reconcile as of next episode. This is actually not a twist at all, considering where our reverse Noah's Ark is going. The pet cat is the true head of the train, and I think that's actually very easy to reconcile.
Yeah, that's super
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
All right, and I mean, as easy as it is, we're gonna have to roll into it next week, and that's gonna wrap it up for this week's episode. Remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always go ahead and send us an email over at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or shoot us a tweet over at Let's Worldbuild, or you can become part of our community by joining our Discord, or if you're feeling incredibly generous, you can always give us money over at Patreon. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together.